where history's shadows cast long, unsettling doubts, the truth lies buried. From cryptic wartime codes to assassinations that scarred generations, unearth the secrets the world tried to forget. Hosts Tim Gardner and Virginia Picotte guide you through a labyrinth of unanswered questions, where every clue pulses with danger and intrigue, and perhaps an opinion or two. It's not all facts, because history never is. Welcome to the Ciphered Past.
All right, everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Ciphered Past. I'm your host, Tim Gardner, along with our very special guest, Eli Frame today. Eli, how are you, bud?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much. And this episode is called Reflections of Relevancy. And this is about the JFK assassination back in 1963. And we discuss it with a topic of questions. First and foremost, Eli, again, welcome to our show. I'm very pleased to have you on.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. We've chatted a lot on Twitter, so it's nice to put a face to, to the chat.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. It's the same way. And we talked about a lot of things on the docket, and a lot of things are going to be really interesting. I just want, to start the show out today. Did you hear the news about the task force moving on to the MLK hearings? And I just want to get your thoughts on, as we start, basically your quick reaction to that.
Yeah, I saw that they're moving on to that. I'm certainly supportive of that, and kind of more into that than I would be into the aliens. But I just hope that it's not a situation where Luna and the committee think they got the Joannides file out, and that's what Morley wanted, and they got it, and now on to the next thing, case closed. Hopefully in the background, we'll still have the committee's folks, their team, working with the research community to close out the files that are outstanding, get things released. And it's just, perhaps the new hearing will be MLK. That's great. But hopefully in the background, we still have those folks working with the research community to uncover the documents.
Yeah, that was my thought process too. I mean, it seems like they just weren't super serious about they were serious in the beginning of the year. However, it just seems as of late, it's lost a lot of momentum. I thought they did a really good job bringing Dr. Curtis in, and of course, who else am I forgetting here? Dr. Curtis, and of course,
Doug Horn's great. Abraham Bolton.
And Abraham Bolton. And I thought they did a really good job on that. And I just feel like after that, it kind of lost its momentum a lot. You bring out the Joannides files, and not to say that they're not important, because they are, but I will say, it seems like it's a disappointment. Now, I'm in the camp that believes that the files don't make or break the case. I believe the circumstantial evidence does, but I think at the end of the day, the documents would help a lot, but we weren't going to see any of those, in my opinion. I believe a lot of them were actually destroyed or damaged back in the 70s or right after the assassination.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, from the files that we've seen so far, when people would ask me, just friends, what do you think of it? Or, does this prove anything? Is there a smoking gun, right? My response was normally that, no, there's no smoking gun, but it's filling in. It's providing background support documentation for things that the research community has been proposing and speculating about, for good reason for years. Case in point being the Joanides file, right? We knew he was handling the DRE. We assumed he was using the name Howard. They were denying it. The CIA was denying it. Now we have, the actual records to show that. So it adds the evidence to your theory, which your theory is based on the circumstantial evidence and a lot of testimony from folks and interviews over the last 60 years, right? So now you have the paperwork to support it, which goes a long way when you're making the case, right?
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, I mean, like if you do have the proper documentation, I mean, I can agree with that. I mean, I would say the challenge for me would be the whole fact pattern issue. I don't think that you can actually, and I do give, a lot of the lead researchers in this community a lot of credit. I think the issue is when you kind of lose the forest and the trees where you're talking about, okay, I'm searching for a fact pattern, but I'm ignoring literally all of the circumstantial evidence that's surrounding this. And if I can actually chase, I don't know, to me, I think it's pretty clear about, there was obviously a conspiracy with this story, this case. It's really hard for me. I mean, you as an attorney, you probably would look at this at first glance, just hearing a story about a lone gunman who goes up into a book depository. He makes 3 shots from the 6th floor at kind of an awkward angle, but he does it within the timing is absolutely, what was the timing on that? It was like,
6 seconds.
I want to say
6 something seconds.
Yeah. And it's possible. I mean, they've had marksmen try it and attempt it, but I mean, and then like essentially you get done with that and you stay in town. Okay. You're like staying in town, just chilling out, and you decide to casually take a bus, but then again, the bus doesn't work because you're stuck in traffic. And then you decide to take a cab. Well, that, you get to where you're supposed to go, you change, and then you essentially, to draw more attention to yourself, you decide to go to where a police officer is and you shoot him dead. And then you decide to hightail it to a movie theater and you meet, quote unquote, a handler. So for me, it doesn't add up literally. And we're going to talk about the 45 minutes of after the assassination later on in the show. But I think where I'm going with this, Eli, is the lone narrative theory is sort of parallel to what we're getting in these file talks and these events that you're seeing as of late. Because we all know better. We all know that Oswald didn't have enough time to do it. We all know that the 45 minutes after the assassination absolutely makes no sense. It's sort of the same parallel with like what's going on with these files. Okay, there's a lot more meat on the bone to look for. Like if you're going to like Bill Harvey's travel records, all these other things that you could potentially be looking for. But you're getting things like in the Joanides file, and of course, the Diaz file that just came out, which is interesting, but it doesn't really do anything. And so that's my thing. And then now that they're taking attention to going to the MLK assassination, which I'm very happy that they're doing, I feel like I just hope that it doesn't take off the main topic at hand, which is the JFK assassination, which I think is super important.
I totally agree. I mean, you have JFK, MLK, RFK, right, and Malcolm X. You've got these 4 leaders, revolutionary leaders during the 60s who were killed, all with a whole lot of shadow over it and a lot of withheld documents. Now, like you said, on the JFK side, for me, it's open and shut. It was a conspiracy. Like you said, I think the facts, just the facts as we know them, point to that. Now, I know there's a lot of questions around the RFK and the MLK and the Malcolm X. So it's the constant secrecy, right? So for the Joanides file, okay, it came out. Yes, we've proven that he was handling the DRE. The DRE knew of Oswald. They're the first ones to promulgate a JFK conspiracy theory, right? The night of the assassination, with his go-ahead or preemptively on his go-ahead. And the CIA has denied it for, 62 years. So the question becomes, why did they deny it? That's my question. Why did you deny it? What else are you denying? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So while the documents continue to build out the file, give us other facts, you mentioned Harvey's travel records, right? So we have eyewitnesses who have seen things, reported things that have been documented but we don't have the official paperwork behind it. And like you said, a lot of that's been destroyed. We know that, at least in Chad Nagel's great series that he did on the Trail of Destruction, there was, 12 major things that have been destroyed. The Hoover Johnson call of the
Hmm.
morning of the assassination, that's been confirmed destroyed. The Air Force One tapes, the Secret Service records that they destroyed in the 90s after the ARB was impaneled. I mean, right? So
Hmm.
why the destruction? You telling me this is their document retention folks that are coming in at Secret Service and telling them they need to destroy anything over 7 years old? I don't think so.
Yeah, it just really doesn't. To me, I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when it comes to like for them to decide to go ahead and like, maybe I don't know. I mean, like again, they got the KGB files coming up here, which is interesting. But I think for me personally, for them to sort of put this in the back burner, I think is not very productive because how important the case is, and you know as well as I do that MLK is equally as important. Malcolm X is, and of course RFK. So those are very very important cases, but this one kind of like, I mean, this one really, really set America back along with the other ones. But I believe it like that day, it kind of just changed things for, I mean, the worse.
Yeah, this was the granddaddy. This was the first one. And this, I think whoever was responsible in this situation, once the cover up was in motion, and they realized they got away with it, they're emboldened. What does somebody do who commits a crime and gets away with it? I'm assuming they can continue to commit crimes, right?
Hmm.
If the reaction had been different, perhaps you wouldn't have had the MLK or RFK.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just interesting, and then it's a major chain reaction, and with all the events through history. So without further ado, Eli, we're going to go ahead and actually do a brief summary about your background, and then we're going to go ahead and get into our main topic of the day. And again, the show is called Cipher Past. Virginia Picotte is out today. She is a little under the weather. She will be joining us in our next episode, and we are glad to have all you here, especially Eli. But Eli, feel free to give our listeners a little bit of a background of you.
Sure. So during the day, I'm a corporate attorney, trained and working for about 20 years at that. And then in my spare time, I'm kind of a JFK rabbit hole explorer. Been quite a number of years now. It's what I spend most of my reading time on, and my spare time. I do have a wife and 4 kids, so that's the bulk of my time. But my main hobby or intellectual pursuit is currently the JFK assassination.
I hear you there, man. Me too. Yeah, it's a great rabbit hole to be involved with. It's great to meet the people that you get involved with. And yeah, we're really glad to have you on the show, man. So thanks again for being here. So yeah, I mean, what we're going to start out today with, and thanks again for the initial reactions about what we saw today with the breaking news. But I'd like to talk about that day. Oops. I'll edit that out. I would like to talk about that day in general and just the shooting positions. And one thing I'd like to talk about, you got that graph I sent you earlier. I hope you did, right? So I just want to get your thoughts on specific area and like your thought process of where you think the shots came from a high probability standpoint. And we won't get into the shooters because again, that's one of those things I don't know if we'll ever know truly, like factually. But I would like to get your take on the shooting positions and the probabilities of each one. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll start out and talk about each particular building or each area. So the Daltex building, what do you think about that?
I think the Daltex building is a high probability location for the shot that we believe hit JFK in the back to the right of the spine. What is it, 6 inches down from the shoulder? That Gerald Ford then penciled out and put into the neck, right, to make it
Mm-hmm.
confirm with the single bullet theory. But we know from the autopsy testimony and notes that there was a injury to the back. Of course, that did not go through, did not come out the front, so we couldn't have anything from the front. I don't believe Oswald was in the sniper's nest or firing from that position. So based on the logistics, I think that would have to come from the Dowtex building, could be the county records building, but somewhere in that vicinity. Then you also have the tag bullet, right, that missed the first shot that we call it, hit the concrete and ricocheted up on a bystander. So I think those would be the probable locations for those shots.
Yeah, I know, and it's interesting too. And I think that when we're looking at each particular spot, so we got the grassy knoll, the book depository, the overpass, storm drain. The storm drain area has always been interesting to me, but you and I talked earlier, it'd be pretty hard to be on the overpass specifically with all the people that were there and then to escape as fast as you make the shot. So the grassy knoll to me seems to be like really the most realistic area there because we have witnesses that saw people behind the knoll there that identified as Secret Service people. Most notably Ed Hoffman. Ed Hoffman went ahead and said that he saw two men. One man was dressed in a suit, a little pudgy, in my opinion, kind of fit the Jack Ruby type mold. The other one was in like work clothes with a work hat. He assembled the rifle together, threw the rifle over to the guy. They did a quick shot, boom, took the rifle right back, disassembled the rifle, ran off down the railroad tracks. Now, that's a possibility. I mean, if that was the case, that these guys were absolutely trained to the T on this thing. They had been practicing this literally for about a year.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's the famous scene from the JFK movie, right? When they're breaking down the rifle. You have the same thing from Lee Bowers, who was in the railroad yard up in the tower, and he described, I think 3 cars coming in and out, and then a couple men. One man seemed to be on a radio. One man parked by the fence. Cars right up against the fence. Then behind the car and between the car and the fence. And I agree with you that the grassy knoll seems to be the highest probability location of a shot based on the ballistics from the Parkland doctors, right? So you have an entry wound in the neck. You have a large exit wound in the back of the head. You have all the Dealey Plaza witnesses running up there. You have 40 plus folks saying that they heard noises from there, including Kenny O'Donnell and Dave Powers that were in the motorcade with JFK, who were then forced to change their testimony by the FBI, later came out and corrected that, decades later. And then I think 21 of those witnesses who heard something from the grassy knoll were police officers. And then you mentioned before the presence of a Secret Service agent there tells me that something was going on there, meaning that a Secret Service agent who was not in the Secret Service, somebody with credentials that could flash to somebody in the public, say, I'm with the Secret Service, this is cordoned off. And the Secret Service tells us that nobody was on the ground in Dealey Plaza. Everybody was in the motorcade that went to Parkland.
Yeah, to me, that's interesting because I believe, the old saying goes, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And that's literally when it comes to that. I mean, we see we're going to be talking about the films later on, but I mean, just watching from the Nick's vantage point, that video, to see again, we'll get into particulars of that later on, but I mean, I am just really surprised. I mean, the people had that amount of bravery to literally know that there was a gunman up there on the knoll. Did you see all the people that just ran up there? They were bum rushing that area. That really surprised me.
Yeah. I mean, right after the shots in the both movies, you see folks hitting the deck, right?
Yep.
And then very soon thereafter, they're up and running up the hill. So yeah.
It's amazing. So yeah, that would say that's probably the highest probability when it comes to, in my opinion as well. I think that's where you go there. But I mean, at the end of the day, the book depository thing is really interesting as well, because, there has been speculation out there that there was a gunman on the roof. There's speculation out there, obviously, a fourth floor. And on the Hughes film that we saw earlier, there's no indication to me that there was anything available on the fourth floor. What I will say is that the sixth floor obviously was a planted sniper's nest, but that particular building was known to have at least 3 rifles there. The 308, the Mauser, and I want to say the other one was the Carcano. But the Carcano was not found up on that floor. The Carcano was actually found on the 4th floor, which is super interesting to me.
Yeah, the Mauser has always, stuck out to me as one of the likely weapons, right? First of all, finding multiple rifles in this building after the president's been, right? Okay, that doesn't seem like a coincidence. And to have a policeman, most of whom were World War II vets, and they're finding a rifle that's stamped made in Italy. And to think that they would misidentify that Carcano as a Mauser 6.75,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it. I mean, we had one who was an expert in firearm identification sign an affidavit that he found a 7.65 Mauser, later to go back and change that to a 6.5 Carcano. That's clearly stamped 6 point Italy. I don't buy it.
I don't buy it either. I mean, it's just interesting because again, like you watch on all the news media outlets, it was funny initially that everybody from Walter Cronkite to Dan Rather to all, everybody, they were talking about the Mauser. And it's interesting because they had stated later on, the Dallas Police Department said they made they misidentified the weapon itself. And it blows my mind because the only way that they'd be able to tie this to Oswald is because of this quote unquote mailed in rifle that was a Carcano, that was addressed to Alec Heidel. And so to me, I mean, especially with kind of, I'm no arms expert, but the way I look at this is with that particular weapon and how cheap it was to do that amount of damage to a human being from that angle, like a little cheap Italian Carcano rifle with a very kind of I don't want to say broken scope, but like an off scope on it.
Yeah, it was misaligned.
Misaligned, and you couldn't. I mean, there's just no way you could do all that damage, in my opinion. I mean, I believe you could probably hit Teague. I believe that you could possibly even hit the curb. Where what's his name? Excuse my name.
James Tigg.
Not James Tigg, but the guy that worked with the Dallas Police Department that found the extra bullet. I have his name on my head and I cannot remember it.
Oh, who just came out a year or two ago? Said he found the bullet on the stretcher, or he found it in
not the
window?
Secret Service agent. I'm losing it here. It's I usually know it. Last name starts with TH. Regardless, anyways, so he was Roger Craig's he was Roger Craig's boss, essentially. He had found it was that famous video with the FBI agent. They found the bullet and the FBI agent tucked it into his jacket. But I can't remember that. Anyways, so it would make sense if you're in that particular building and you're shooting. I believe like from that cheapo gun, you would be able to hit like you said, the back shot where it only goes in a couple of inches, or even possibly nick and Teague, or even hitting the curb side. But to do that amount of extensive head damage and also the clear entry wound into the throat makes me believe I don't believe that they think that we're dumb, be put bluntly, but I think that they don't think that we're educated enough. And even now, Alan Dole said, most people don't read. I think that's how they look at people. If you base it on Oswald being up in the books depository, hidden, 3 people with that particular rifle, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I believe the Mauser could probably make a little bit more damage, or even the 308 that they were talking about, but not the Carcano.
Not, and certainly not the way it was assembled. Not the Oswald Carcano, the one that they claim was Oswald's. As you mentioned, a misaligned scope. You can't even cycle the cartridge without it jamming. He comes in with 4 bullets, fires 3, misses with 1. He's a notoriously poor shot. Right, within record time, the FBI marksman can't reproduce. He's fails a paraffin test as soon as they test him for it. The guys who used the Carcano in testing post assassination were covered with residue that showed up on paraffin tests. And you're telling me he was able to get off those 2 shots that were hits, wipe the whole thing down, get down to the second floor and see Truly and Baker in 90 seconds and be cool as as if nothing had happened? It's a much harder story to buy just based on the facts. Throw in the Dealey Plaza witnesses who, the TSBD witnesses who, Victoria Adams and the woman coming down, the other woman coming down the stairs, they hear nothing. Who's giving Oswald change for his coke right around the time of the shooting. And remember, the motorcade's running behind schedule, so at least 5 minutes behind schedule. So the assassin believes that it's going to be there at 12:25. Right. So you're not downstairs eating lunch, getting cokes with the intention of hightailing it up there in 60 seconds and then doing all this, right? You would be ready. And if it was just Oswald, he would probably have taken the shot coming down Main Street. Coming down Houston, right towards him, right? Maybe right when he turned 2. But you have that perfect triangulation there once it turns onto Elm Street. Assuming you have
and
a Daltex, a Knoll, and somebody else at the TSBD probably, right? Which is the same way they set it up for Castro when they were training the Castro Cubans to go in and get Castro.
Yeah, I mean, it really goes deep. I mean, I think the interesting thing about that is that, it obviously was pre-coordinated, had to have been, and there's a lot of speculation out there. And again, I want to just say that my opinion is my own on this, as well as Eli is his own. Any factual information is what, we'll see if it is factual or not, but I'm saying circumstantial evidence is presented in a way where him and I are just debating things in a friendly manner with each other about what we know. So in no way, and I look forward to your feedback on this, Eli, if our viewers were looking at this and saying, is this all factual information? Well, it's circumstantial. In your mind, how would you argue that we have everything lined up that is coincidental, that makes sense? But unfortunately, with all this factual stuff happening, or the factual stuff that happened, that they said that happened, obviously the lone gunman theory and the Warren Commission stuff. And I don't want to go way too left field on this, but just for our viewers who are watching this to kind of look at it and go, well, is this 100% true? I believe it's 100% true. You believe it's 100% true. I don't want to speak for you, so I'll let you give your take on this. But this is what, from the years that we've been researching, what we've determined.
That's right. And, it's as close to 100% for me as I can get based on the evidence. Now, it is circumstantial evidence, but it's based on witnesses who were there, who had no reason to exonerate Oswald. I'm sure they were being pressured to find him guilty. A lot of them, we know that the Warren Commission either didn't speak with, knew of them but didn't speak with them, or questioned them in a way such that they weren't asking the questions that would lead to the answers that those folks were out there to give. For example, the Victoria Adams coming down the stairs, I don't believe she was ever interviewed. She heard the shots, was watching from the 4th floor, 3rd floor, ran to the only stairwell in the TSBD. The elevators were out. For some reason, the electricity was out, right? And ran down the stairs, encountered nobody in the stairs. And that was during that 90 seconds when Oswald needed to get down to the 2nd floor, where he was absolutely confirmed by the manager of the book depository and a Dallas police officer 90 seconds after the shots. I was sitting there drinking a Coke, right? So we have that. And I think, the thing that I think really sticks into people and might undermine what they would see as, okay, if Oswald wasn't up there shooting, Why did he do what he did afterwards? Now, I know we were going to discuss that. We might as well discuss it now because I think it fits in. Is you mentioned he hops on a bus, right? So first they see him, he's drinking a Coke. President's been shot. Okay. He is drinking a Coke. He mills around, goes downstairs. A reporter comes in looking for a phone. Oswald shows him to the phone, mills around out front, and leaves. Okay. He says he figured work was done for the day, or was told that work was done for the day. Then he goes off and starts doing some kind of odd things, right? So I don't have any question as well that he was up to something. He had some plan. He knew of something. I don't think it was that he was shooting the president, but the fact that he took a taxi, got out a block from his rooming house, went in, retrieved a revolver, and then went to the Texas Theater and started acting, sitting by various folks, as you mentioned. He was clearly doing something, pursuing his own ends, I'll call it. If he was there to assassinate the president, I think he would have brought a revolver with him, not left it at home and then ran and got it afterwards. I don't think he would have milled around the book depository. And I also don't think that he would have claimed to be a patsy and talked to Marina, his wife, and Robert, his brother, the way that he did, the way that they testified that he was confident that he'd be released soon, that this was a misunderstanding. We've seen the news conferences talking to Marina about making sure she gets the baby shoes and things, and he's not concerned about being convicted of this. Right? Have you ever heard of a political assassin who then doesn't leave any kind of manifesto, any reason for this political assassination of one of the more left-wing presidents we've had in the last 75 years, who, was really aligned with what Oswald said he was in favor of in terms of, civil rights, a détente with the Soviet Union.
Those were all brilliant points, and this, yeah, we're gonna delve into that conversation now, and you segued into that beautifully, Eli. I agree with you 100% on that. I mean, the thing for me is, if we want to paint a picture about like how things, and you did a great job. It's like he leaves the building, okay, and obviously he's doing it in a casual way. And again, I bring this up because if you just killed a U.S. president who is hugely popular, there were so many people out there in Dallas supporting him that day. Why would you just slip out, stay in town, and casually just act the way that Oswald was doing? See, that's the first question. Why would you just act casually and get on a bus, get a transfer, get off the bus, and then go to a cab? So that's the first question. To me, it says that he wanted to go home and, like you said, get his gun to meet a possible handler at the theater, right? I feel like he had to go to the theater to meet with somebody to figure out the next steps. That was by design, okay? The problem with that is that that's what he thought, okay? What he didn't know is he was being set up and framed for the biggest murder of all time, and a murder for a police officer as well. So that first question, I'd like for you to decipher that. I think that's actually a really good one.
Oh, which question? I'm sorry.
The question for him when he, acting as casually as he did, going on the bus, getting the transfer, allegedly being witnessed by that lady who actually saw him shoot Tippit later on, by the way, which again, that's another bizarre circumstance. And then he gets into the cab.
Who the Warren, Helen Markham, right? So
yeah, Markham, yeah.
Warren Commission attorneys later comes out and says, she's a complete mess. I would have never, cited her ever. She's the one that they rely on to say that she saw someone like Oswald shoot Tippit. Now, mind you, the first shot killed him. Then go put 3 more bullets in him in the street. Of all we know about Oswald over the years, this is not Oswald behavior in my opinion. And of course, neither is shooting Kennedy, but you see a man who confronts the Cubans on Canal Street and is super calm, collected, hands at his sides. What are you guys going to do? Come on, hit me, right? I'm here for a
Hmm.
scene. I'm here to build up my legend, or I'm here to build up my newsreel. So I don't see that happening. And then, I think his name's Warren Reynolds is another interesting one who said,
Oh
no,
yeah.
by me, it wasn't Oswald. And within a matter of months, he gets shot in the head and then changes his story. Yeah, he looked like Oswald. And then there was the woman with diabetes who they said couldn't testify, even though she talked to Mark Lane quite a bit. And her diabetes did not prevent her from seeing what happened.
Right.
I know you've spoken about her before. So
Aquila Clemens. Yeah.
Aquila Clemens, yes. And as you mentioned, folks at the theater had him there at 1 o'clock or shortly thereafter when Tippit was killed at what, 1:15?
But yeah, Butch Burroughs saw him at 107 getting popcorn and getting ready to watch the movie. So it just absolutely overlaps with each other. The timing is just, it's, I mean, I always say this, Eli, in order to solve the assassination, in order to actually prove if Oswald was guilty or not guilty, you have to look at the 45 minutes after the assassination. And in my opinion, he just didn't have time to pull all that off. It was nearly impossible. The thing for me, which I think is really random, is why leave your boarding house and then go directly over to Oak Cliff, the area of Oak Cliff, right? And decide to kill Tippit. It just doesn't make any sense to me, especially after you kill the president, right? You would think that at any particular time, if you killed a US president, especially as unpopular or popular in 1963 as John F. Kennedy was, right? I mean, you would get out of Dodge. And to my, from what my research over time, and we can talk about this when we have you on again, is obviously there's more to the Dallas Police Department. And the Dallas Police Department, in my mind, they were a taxi for a lot of these quote unquote either red herrings or gunmen or suspicious figures to get out of town. That would only make sense to me because of the suspicious behavior of that department itself. But for the life of me, how does that make sense that he randomly goes over and kills Tippit after he kills the president of the United States? I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
It doesn't make sense. And, I know shortly after the assassination, a lot of it, as with any killing of a police officer, it was certainly, I guess, frowned upon or taboo to talk about Tippit's activities in and around the assassination. But we do have a lot of odd sightings and evidence as to what he was doing that afternoon. Patrolling Oak Cliff, or told to patrol Oak Cliff, when everybody else was called down to Dealey Plaza. Or running in and making a frantic phone call that nobody answered and running back out to his car. Or staying at the service station watching the off-ramp that comes from Dealey Plaza into Oak Cliff. So you see some odd behavior rather than driving around patrolling or taking the call and going to Dealey Plaza. So it's odd. It's odd to say the least. And then the only witness that they can tie it to is Helen Markham, who seems to have been discredited.
Yeah, and there's been stories about her being like being an addict and stuff. And and as somebody who is in recovery, I can understand at that particular time when my focus in general, if I were to see something happen, I wouldn't be able to remember it clearly. So I would think that if she was inebriated, which that's alleged, I'm not saying she was, but you could also be a dry drunk. And you could have that distorted reality of what you see. Again, like a lot of the major characters that you see in the story that are on the side, let's say, I don't want to discredit anybody, but let's say like the babushka lady, like the people that claim to be her, other people, let's say like that claim they killed the president. There's a gentleman that you and I both talked about that we both kind of snicker about, but it's just these particular people that are characters that it doesn't make sense. And just like a lot of the events that happen, it's crazy. So I don't know if that makes sense with Markham, but yeah, the Warren Reynolds story to me is absolutely bizarre. Warren Reynolds, he didn't recognize Oswald. He didn't pick Oswald up, but he got shot in the head. Yeah, like you said. And he somehow miraculously is like, you know what? It was Oswald after all.
Right. Right. And unfortunately, there were too many of these witnesses who, Lee Bowers, we mentioned earlier, is died in a single car crash soon thereafter. So we've got the guy in Jack Ruby's apartment, right, with the karate chop. So
Yeah,
I
Jim
there,
Kofi. Yeah.
it goes on and on and on. And I know that's another thing, that a rabbit hole that folks can go down. And I think there's a lot of validity there to say that, to come back up to a very high level. If Oswald did this, as the Warren Commission said, what's the need for everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the need?
Mm-hmm.
Why are witnesses dropping? Why are all these extra files? Why are there destruction of files? Why are there thousands of files classified, an abundance of documentation from various agencies back and forth to confirm that there was one man that killed the president, and that was determined within 48 hours. Effectively, as soon as Oswald was dead, they could declare him the lone gunman. And the FBI wrote up the report within 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting. There's other things that corroborate that story, specifically, like Oswald apparently went to the FBI and gave them a note. We don't know what it is, but allegedly it was supposed to be about him warning the FBI about staying away from his wife. They destroyed that the day he was executed. So I would be interested to find the contents in that. So there's just a lot of different coincidences even surrounding this. And in my opinion, I mean, I think, the story is so obvious with everything that surrounds us. I mean, it's really obvious to me. I mean, like there is conspiracy. There is a lot of stuff that we have to put our finger on. And when we go back to the beginning of the show, again, it's just really hard for me to accept documentation as kind of, how should I put it, like the condemning factor, or for the public to realize it. I think we're at an area, a time right now, where either you really don't care about it because it happened 60 something years ago, or you really do care about it, like us in the JFK community. So it's really, it's interesting to me, because again, what has gone on today is a direct result of what happened back then. Now, mind you, it's different episodes, but it all draws back to the fact that our government essentially killed the people's president that day. And then you're seeing the residuals of that happen since, whether it be the assassination of Malcolm, Martin, RFK, the Iran-Contra, Watergate, you name it, all the events have happened over time. A direct result of this, in my opinion. Now, who's to say would all this stuff would have happened if Kennedy didn't die and he remained president? We don't know. But I do believe that, again, in Relevancy, sorry for the long-winded rant. I just where I was going with that.
No, I completely agree. I mean, the way I view it is the Kennedy assassination is kind of the Rubicon at which we passed from being a constitutional democracy into an empire with an entrenched bureaucracy that's not accountable to the people. So once you had the assassination or the coup, and it was covered up and continues to be covered up, that emboldens the perpetrators of the conspiracy. It destroys the faith in government, which you can tie right back to 1964, right? It's in the 70s and 80s, faith in government. Consistently since then, it's never recovered. It's like consistently in the 20s now. I think it peaked up a little bit right at 9/11 when everybody was unified. And it also emboldens whoever has committed this conspiracy to continue it on. And you see a lot of the same folks who are suspects or peripheral in this JFK assassination involved directly in Vietnam and Laos. You have Shackley, Rodriguez, Carl Jenkins, I believe, other folks going to Vietnam. You have Operation Phoenix in Vietnam. Guess who's in the Watergate scandal? Guys who were tied to Cuba, guys who were peripheral to the JFK assassination, Iran-Contra, right?
Yep.
Jenkins, Rafael Quintero, Felix Rodriguez. Okay, so these, I'm not saying these are the same guys who are running around, controlling everything, but there's a consistent theme. And even with 9/11, not to say anything about the actual attacks, but the response to it, I see is so similar to what we read about in the attitude in the 1950s and 60s towards communism, which is, it's us or them. It's one will be destroyed, one will survive. And what we saw after 9/11, which I think is more of what kind of our generation, right, is You're with us or you're against us. And anything is justified in the pursuit of terrorism. Anything is justified to prevent the spread of communism and the destruction of international communism. And that's something that JFK didn't believe. That's something that JFK was working with Khrushchev, and the last couple months, attempting to start a dialogue with Castro to hopefully find some form of coexistence between the West and, communism. And that was anathema to what these Cold Warriors believed. And I think that's why they took him out. And, I think that's not a very controversial thing. It's certainly within our JFK community, but that was the death of, a peaceful coexistence solution. And we've had what I would think of as a war state ever since.
It's true. I mean, whether it be in our neighborhoods with the opiates, whether it be these wars that make really no sense. I mean, like Vietnam. Now, I don't want to really, the Ukraine war too, I don't want to get political about that because I just choose not to be. Again, it seems that could actually be resolved. But then again, I don't run either country. It's unfortunate what's happening over there. But I mean, again, Iran, all these other, like, it seems like we're spinning our wheels with everything. So like you go to 9/11, all of a sudden they go to Saudi Arabia and that the after effects of that. There seems to be things with every big event since 1963 where they're not addressing things the way that they should, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems like everything, whether even what happened with Butler and Trump, you kind of allow a sniper up there to kind of take him out. That whole story doesn't add up. The 9/11 story, I don't know if it'll ever make sense to me. It's really tragic. I still remember the morning it happened. I woke up and, one of my college roommates was like, dude, we're under attack right now. I mean, like, we're under attack. And you turn on the TV and it's the most frightening thing that you see because, again, you mentioned beautifully, that was, our JFK assassination. It was horrible, right? It was like, you remember post that, like everybody was super nice to each other. We were all united. It was insane. Crazy period. Sorry for the rant, but it's just the bigger issues. It just seems like JFK, even to RFK, even to Malcolm, even to MLK, all the things just don't line up directly the way that they really should, right? So it seems to me that I don't want to say everything's a conspiracy because I don't want to be foil hat guy, but I just have a hard time believing that they don't think that we can handle the truth on so many things. And that's why they like to hide things from us. And that's why I believe the CIA, and I'll just say it now, I believe the CIA thinks that they're bigger than our own government. So that's just my take.
I don't have a reason for it either, but it's the excessive secrecy is very frustrating and it's disheartening. And, the people know when they're being lied to, right? At this point. And I think that's why you have such low trust in the government over the last decades.
Mm-hmm.
And, and maybe people just tune out. They don't care, right? They don't believe what they see on the news, or they don't believe what they've heard from this talking head or this politician. But at this point, a lot of people probably have said, what am I going to do? Right? I'm going to get back with my family. I'm going to live my life.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do? But this all kind of, at least as far as I can pin it back, it precipitated from this. This is the first thing you can point to, JFK being, the watershed moment for when we kind of.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it beautifully, man. I mean, like, what are we going to do, right? I mean, like, these events happen. I mean, the only thing that we can do, in my opinion, because with what's going on with the task force, we see the writing on the wall, right? I get the feeling that this thing is going to be put on the back burner and it's just going to essentially fade away. Okay. How do we address that? I would say just keep the topic trending. And if you keep the topic trending by spreading awareness about this assassination, I believe that you'll be able to open up, Pandora's box, because again, I still am a sucker for the Constitution. I have liberal beliefs. I have conservative beliefs. But I am I am big on the Constitution. I believe that the people have the power. I do believe that still, even with a corrupt government. I believe that anything's possible in this country. I mean, look at you. You're a lawyer, you're a very successful lawyer. I work in AI, um, I've been given every opportunity to really succeed in this country. And that's why I believe that if we keep this particular topic trending and keep it going and keep it going, I believe that something will give whether it be like, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, hopefully not another 60 years from now.
Yeah. I think you're right. And it's, what can we do now? Continue to push for documentation release, documents that we know, documents that we suspect are out there. And I also think it's gaining the attention of the younger generation. We need another Oliver movie. Not that exact thing, but some sort of, a new vector to get into the younger generation, to our generation and under, right? Some form of media content, some way to get to them that's not in their history books or talking about, we need to release these documents to help people understand at least why we think it's still relevant. Believe strongly that it's still relevant. But we need to, we got to convince them. We got to tell the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to be read this JFK assassination book that cites, 10,000 CIA documents and is interesting to us, perhaps. And that's the problem with most of the books is they're great for us, but not for general consumption.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few that are really good for general consumption, but if somebody wanted a book that wasn't really trying to go down the rabbit hole, there's very few that I would really recommend.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's very few David Talbots out there. Boy, that book, oh God, The Devil's Chessboard. I mean, yeah, boy, what a wonderful book. Or The Man Who Knew Too Much, which is my favorite book I love that book. I mean, that book is phenomenal, man. It is so good. And I love your quote that you did from that. What was the quote that you did on your timeline? You had a picture of Nagel, and I just love that. It
The El Paso one, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember it, but yeah, the El Paso one.
Yeah. Yeah.
That might have been my first book. That might have been my first book, but that's a fantastic one.
Yeah, I love that book. I just like the fact that, I always called Nagel, the Forrest Gump of the JFK assassination. His story was just insanely bizarre.
And it's frustrating at times too, right? It's very frustrating because the way he speaks, the way he spoke,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know here or there, but it's interesting to read then in Albarelli, The Coup in Dallas, and to read in Mary's book, the Woman I Know. There are things that come across, right? So with Nagel, and Nagel may not be mentioned necessarily, but the Hotel Luma comes into those books a lot, and Warren Broglie, and the goings on in Mexico City that are referred to in that book from 1993 or whenever Man Who Knew Too Much was written. A lot of that does, I think, get underlined in the other books that have used research that has come out more recently from newer documents, right? So he's been proved right in a lot of things, Nagel, that is, but who knows? It's a fascinating story. I'll give you that. The same with A Woman I Know. Whether it's all true or not, it's a great book, and that's another one I'd recommend to people that,
oh man, you
can pick up and read. You don't have to care about the JFK assassination.
Dude, and we're going to have her on soon, which I'm really excited about. But I mean, you're just general consensus of that book and Jerry Cobb's story. I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah. So her book kind of blew me away. I first encountered June Cobb in John Newman's books. He's got four he's got JFK in Vietnam, Oswald in the CIA, and then he's got the four pertaining specifically to the assassination. And in one or two of those in the beginning, he goes a lot into June Cobb. And he actually was talking to June Cobb. I believe it was in person. She had sent him documents and letters. And he mentioned in the book that his house was broken into and what the thieves stole were the June Cobb files. And then around that same period, I've learned from reading Mary's book, she was talking to Jerry Cobb, who Mary goes on to prove pretty convincingly was operating as June Cobb, at least part of the time. And then in Coup in Dallas, you have the same deal where June Cobb is talking to Hank Albarelli, the author, and meeting with him. And so you have this fascinating idea of an agent, June Cobb, who maybe is being played by more than one actor. Jerry Cobb certainly one, but the fact that Mary talked to John Newman gave him a lot of pictures and described who she was meeting with, Jerry Cobb, and he couldn't confirm that that's who he talked to. But the woman he talked to had documents, right? She could talk to him in quite detail about these different operations in the Cuba and Mexico City. It was my first exposure to the idea of commandeering someone's identity and using it, having someone else use it. So she shows very clearly that June Cobb is a real woman, was a real woman that lived in New York. Jerry Cobb was a real woman, that lived in Texas and Florida. But she commandeered her identity, I believe knowingly. I think Mary says knowingly, as well as spoke with these other authors about, this time period and what she was doing. And nobody can really point out. They've spoken to this woman, right? All three of them have spoken to this woman or other women claiming to be her. But unlike the folks in Dealey Plaza, the babushkas, they have documentation. They can sit there and provide evidence as to what they were doing in Cuba and Mexico City. So it's very mind-bending.
I mean, it would make for a fabulous movie too. I mean, like the whole story is incredible, and I, to offset with that, it's just interesting because again, with her being a pilot and whatnot, and then just the layers. I mean, there's various accounts about like how the babushka lady could have had I don't know, like a poisonous dart in on the camera. I don't know. I mean, think a lot of that stuff is all, I don't want to call it far-fetched because anything is possible, right? I mean, we hear about the heart attack gun with the CIA, and I would think that the heart attack gun itself is responsible for some post-deaths of the assassination, especially some of these witnesses and important key figures. But yeah, it's just interesting to me what the CIA has when it comes to like certain gadgets, but it's also interesting to me too when it comes to these doubles, right? So since I started studying this Kennedy assassination, I didn't know I'd go down a rabbit hole of like discovering doubles, discovering like, just the flurry of identities that are out there, how bad character-wise these people were. I mean, like these people were about as immoral as you could possibly think. I mean, we're talking well-known people out of this as well. It's just amazing. But to go back to my point about the doubles program, that you talked about June and Jerry Cobb. The Oswald situation is really interesting. Okay, I have talked to Corey Hughes about this. I've also read John Armstrong stuff. But the more and more that we're going over time to discover Oswald in this past, and it's interesting because before, we weren't really allowed to know too much about Oswald, but now that we get to start knowing more about Oswald, the creepier the story gets. I mean, Eli, this is insane. We're talking like Twilight Zone stuff. Like there's a potential that he had like a twin brother, right? And his twin brother was a guy named Harvey, and then he was Lee. But then again, he had two mothers. But then again, like, I mean, we're talking, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet. I come across it, and we certainly have impersonations of Oswald. We know that there were impersonations, right?
Yeah.
In Dallas. So, so throw that as another arrow in the quiver for conspiracy, right? The Alone Nut doesn't have people pretending to be him before the fact, especially in Mexico City. We know there's one in Mexico City because, that's confirmed. We actually know that for one reason, because Hoover calls LBJ, and despite, deleting the audio of the thing, we have a transcript that's, even though it's summarized into just a page or two, he tells LBJ that, the man that's calling himself Oswald in Mexico City was not this Lee Harvey Oswald.
Okay.
So that's not a lone nut. That's a conspiracy.
It is bizarre. Just why I think it's so crazy is because, again, there's talk about, like, a second Oswald being arrested at the balcony at the theater. So you had two Oswalds at the theater. It's just really, after I started getting into this, Eli, I just my mind was blown by, you know, just everything that's involved with this thing. It's a complete circus. And then you also have to look in totality the people that were there in Dealey Plaza, right? So you look at it for a normal parade, right? Why do you have all these important intel agents there? Why do you have a lot of this, pretty much the majority of the CIA there, world leaders, Richard Nixon going to a Pepsi Cola function, but they're all in Dallas that particular day for a normal parade. Now, if that's by coincidence, I don't even tell you, that is bizarre in itself.
It's odd. And then you have a known French OAS assassin getting deported out of Dallas that day, sent to Mexico, who had tried to kill de Gaulle before, right?
So we have Juan Zuetre. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's a little. Then you have we'll go back to Mary's book. You have the plane at Redbird Airport sitting on the tarmac for hours, revving the engines. This is reported by folks who live near Redbird as well. And then the story told by Jerry that they waited. They didn't leave the plane, supposedly. They heard that the president was killed. They stayed. And she was very nervous. They found out that Oswald had been arrested, and they took off within 4 minutes of finding out that Oswald had been arrested on the radio.
Yeah.
So, and that's June Cobb, right? So that's going back to our June Cobb discussion for anybody who's left June Cobb. That's in Mary's story.
Yeah, it just, the whole.
Where do you go? As we've already shown on this discussion, where do you go? I don't know. Where do you go any which way?
I know, and we have gone any which way, which is interesting because you can. And that, what I will say is that because we have gone so many different directions, it's interesting because everybody who's watching this would be able to come right back to where we are, because all this stuff is so interesting. And I just, to me, will this case ever fully get solved? No. I would like your take on this but do you think we are going to make traction within the next 20 years? Like full traction, like maybe possible, like post indictments? Or do you think that because of AI that we're going to really make some headway with this? Because I know they have the new photo analyzing tool that they're coming out with. So there's some potential there that they can actually decipher fraudulent pictures. So we have that avenue to go with. But yeah, I want your take on that. 20 years. What do you see?
Well, that's something I've thought about, but I would think in 20 years, I may be overly optimistic from the last year, even though the comments we've made about the committee, they have produced a lot of documents and shaken a lot of things out. And whether it's thrown out, the JFK documents are thrown out as a distraction from other things that they want to keep the public's attention off of, or perhaps it's actual some disclosure, and hope, or maybe potential additional whistleblowers. I would like to think that we'd be a lot further along. I certainly hope so. And the idea of AI is it's something I've wondered about with these old photos, right? I realize they can't enhance a photo that's already in a poor quality, but to the extent it can make anything more clear or show where, perhaps things that we haven't noticed, that frames have been removed or frames have been reversed, or enhancing other, a lot of the documents in Oswald's file are illegible. I wouldn't say a lot, but there are some that are. And you come across that fairly regularly. You could strain your eyes, you can't read it, but is there some way that technology will allow us to be able to read those documents, that can that can figure that out for us that we haven't been able to do yet.
Yeah, I believe it's a possibility. I mean, I mean, with the analyzing tool, it should be able to see if the film was altered or if the film itself was actually, doctored in some way. So that's always a good thing. But it also would bring enhancements. It would do several things that the technology that we have right now publicly is not able to do. So I look forward to that, but I think it will. I think I would give it within 10 years. I think you made a really good point. I think we this year have had a lot of headway. And and first and foremost, my criticism of the task force starting the show off, uh, it was a tad unfair, I believe. But what I will say is because they've done a lot of really good and solid work. I just feel the disappointment as somebody who doesn't feel like the journey is over with this task force, if that makes sense, Eli.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think back to Gaten Fonzie's book and his write up about the HSCA, right? I think they all seem to have the same feeling when that came to an end. That was a much more thorough investigation. But the politicians, their time runs out or whatever, they move on to the next thing because they got to go back to the voters and stay in front of them and give them something to look at. So, I don't think that the will is ever there on the side of the politicians to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
It was why the ARRB was so great and would be great if we had another one. But, to have an independent commission that's not a political commission, that, even that had its own end date, right? So these all have
Mhm.
it. But this committee to tackle everything that they said they would tackle in this amount of time, it's silly. It's not going to happen. You can't give all those things your attention, at least not to any level of detail.
Yeah. And again, coming from the legal field, you understand that probably to get these documents, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of like pulling teeth, as they would say, to our watchers and listeners of this podcast. In a process like that, that is pretty arduous, isn't it? I mean, like for something to retain stuff like that, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jeff Morley was fighting with the CIA forever to get the Joe and Edie's file. And, you can see what happens when there is a relationship and you have someone like the committee who is now focused on this and you can get their ear. But I know Mary's still trying to get her FOIA request in for the June Cobb files. And it's just, it can sit there for years and years and years. And then you
Hmm.
have average citizens, right? So all of the work is coming from independent researchers on this issue. You have no academic support or any government
Hmm.
or law enforcement support. So these folks are footing the bill for the filings and the lawyers and everything. It's a huge headache.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, and I agree with that. And I think, for somebody as impatient as myself, because it has been 62 years, it's been 30, how long has it been since JFK came out? 91. So what 34 years in. So, you have 60 years, 62 years since the Kennedy assassination. You have 34 years since the um, JFK film has come out. I would say in eras of time, right? Especially during our parents and grandparents, they were more involved with like the mockingbird aspect of believing the news, believing the government, and whatever that was suggested. A very few minute amount of people questioned authority, i.e., Mark Lane and different people of that nature. Where I'm getting with this is I do feel like we are making a lot of progress. And that's why I circle back to what you were talking about, how this year there's been a lot of progress. And I feel like I could be a spoiled brat by myself. And this is just talking about myself, a spoiled brat in regards to wanting more and more and more and more, not knowing how difficult the process is. So I do have to give a lot of credit to the task force. And just because they are choosing to go and put their efforts in other phases, it doesn't mean the people can stop searching and stop looking and making an effort to get this thing solved.
I agree, and I don't know any of the political, workings behind closed doors, but I have to think that if requests keep coming in through the channels and, the pressure stays on, that they know they've done this work. They still have the contacts that they've gotten these other documents from. If there's a reason for them to ask for the continual documents, we can keep it going. Just because they're having hearings about MLK or UFOs or whatever they are, it doesn't mean that you can't send it to their office and continue to push. And, they can send
Hmm.
it over to Ratcliffe or whomever else at the CIA and hopefully shake some things loose.
That's a great point.
It
That's a
might be the
great point.
relationships that were built during this committee, right? Yeah, we know some folks have built commission or built relationships with people on the commission such that hopefully those continue to bear fruit, even though the C-SPAN hearing will be about UFOs.
Which will be interesting, and that in itself is a whole different rabbit hole, which you could talk about that for hours. So again, we're not going to be able to do that here, but yeah, so we're going to be closing the show out here in just a bit, but I really want to thank you for your time today. And usually at the end of the show, we usually give our guests some time to kind of give a final, like, you watch Rome is Burning or Rome, you have your rants, or if you have something to say, feel free. If you don't have anything you'd like to say, or if there's something that you would like to say about the case in general, we always welcome that, just so our audience can actually hear what's on your heart about this, or how you're feeling about things. If you're frustrated, if you're happy, if you have anything that just comes to the top of your head that you want to get out, we usually have our final take of the show. So we definitely love to hear from you if you have something.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is to educate yourself, at least to a basic degree, specifically on this event, the JFK assassination. It doesn't take all these rabbit holes we've talked about. You don't have to go down all those to understand or to get a gist for where the evidence seems to lead, right? So where we have a preponderance of the evidence that there was a conspiracy, and even the House committee, right, came out and said that there was a conspiracy. So if you have a conspiracy, what does that mean? It means everything that we've been told for 62 years and continue to be told is not the truth. And the documents continue to be withheld. And we know it's been admitted that very many documents that would be extremely relevant have been destroyed. So, and we've talked about earlier why it still matters, right? Everything continues to this day, not necessarily related just to JFK, but to this sense of secrecy, the 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 sort of face behind the curtain of, we have these documents, you don't need to know about them. National security, right? You can't know about this because there's national security concerns. They said that in 2017 when they wouldn't release these same documents that they're releasing now. I haven't seen one document that had anything to do with national security. Um, so just the importance of the assassination that continues to this very day, because it was a watershed moment for the country, not just because a president died, but the way it was conducted. And he was taken out by, enemies within his own government, which is pretty horrible to think about.
That sounds a great take, man. Yeah, no, yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, it's just like Julius Caesar, right? And how that was a public display. I mean, it was another public display for what happened with Kennedy. So
Yep.
history kind of repeated itself in that angle, didn't it?
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, I do want to thank you so much for that. And we also have one little final thing about what we're reading this week. And my book specifically this week is In Black and White by Corey Hughes, Volume 1. And that is about Lee Harvey Oswald and his background. So I'm reading it for a second time just because of the doubles program. And I think it's just fascinating about his story. Corey has done massive research on this particular topic. He eats and breathes what he's doing. And I'm not biased because he's my friend, but it's also just the fact that it's a darn good book. So, what book are you reading right now, my friend? What is your choice of the week?
So I have that book and I have not read it yet. It's up next or soon. I'm reading Coup in Dallas by H.P. Albarelli. So halfway through that fascinating book. has a similar issues as some of the other assassination books where, it's a lack of editing or what it is, but it's a lot different than, your bestsellers you'd pick up at the airport. But,
Hmm.
you know, before that, it was Mary's book, A Woman I Know, fantastic book. Was, that's more of a New York Times bestseller type book. And, I think if somebody was new coming to this, if somebody asked me for one book to summarize kind of and be an approachable book, I would say it's one of Anthony Summers' books, Not in Your Lifetime, or JFK and the Unspeakable. JFK and the Unspeakable is my favorite of the assassination books.
That's a great book.
Those two are both excellent books and approachable books. And I say that as compared to a lot of the other books, which spend a lot of time delving into documents, right? Going through
Hmm.
who signed off on which document, when, what were the trails that this went through the various departments of the CIA, which is fascinating to a subset of people, but not to the general public. I wouldn't think so.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Well, listen, Eli, it's been a pleasure, and we'd love to have you back on for a new episode when Virginia gets better. Like I said, she'll be back with us next episode. But we want you back on to talk about the films, that I sent you earlier. But we'll talk about that next episode, and also I want to talk about the Jim Cothy, Bill Hunter, Jack Ruby apartment thing.
Yeah.
If we can kind of mix that together, I think that'd be a great episode. So.
That sounds good. I
Yeah.
appreciate
And
that.
again, thanks again for being on our show. Do you have any social media tags or plugs you'd like to put out to our audience so that way they can follow you?
No, I mean,
Sounds good, my man.
I'm
Sounds
just
good. Well,
doing the research and having fun and talking to you guys and anybody else who's interested.
we appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. And next week, we are going to have Margaret Roberts, the author of Blowback. That should be a good episode. Want to thank you again, Eli, for being on our show, and you have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You too. Appreciate it.
Thank you. The truth is out there, guys, everybody. We'll see you next week.